Today we're going to be talking about long division with polynomials. Okay, so if you look at this example at the top here, okay, you can see we have a trinomial and we want to divide it by a binomial. Now in order to do that, we're going to use a process called long division. Okay, so when we look at it like this, right, the top of our fraction we know is the numerator and the bottom of the fraction we know is the denominator. So what we're doing is we're dividing the numerator by the denominator. So the numerator is what we're going to place under here, under the division bar, okay? We call that the dividend. And the denominator we're going to place outside the division bar, right? This is called our divisor. And the answer we get on top here is going to be our quotient. All right, so let's take a look at the examples on the bottom of this page so we can see how it works. Now, since we're dividing this trinomial by this binomial, remember, the numerator goes underneath the division bar. And the denominator, what we're dividing by, goes out here. Okay, so the divisor goes out here. Okay, so let me show you how this process works. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at the first term outside the division bar and the first term underneath the division bar, okay? Just the first terms. And you're going to say to yourself, what do I multiply this first term by to give me this first term under the division bar? Okay, so we're going to have to multiply this by 2x in order to get a 2x squared, okay? Because x times 2x is 2x squared. So I'm going to take that 2x and I'm going to put it right here on top of the division bar, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this 2x and we're going to distribute it to both terms on the outside. So 2x times x is 2x squared. And then 2x times negative 4 is negative 8x. And I'm going to put it right under here. Okay, so see how these are in line? So what's going to happen now is whenever you do long division, right, we want to subtract this term from this term. And we know when you subtract something, basically you just change the signs. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this positive 2x squared to a negative 2x squared. And I circle my sign to show myself that I changed it. And then I'm going to change this negative 8x to a positive 8x. And I circle my sign to show I changed it. Okay, it's super important to circle them because it lets me know, look at this, I changed both signs. Okay, so now what's going to happen is I'm going to combine my terms. 2x squared minus 2x squared is nothing, right? They cancel off. And that should always happen with your first terms here. And then negative 3x plus 8x is positive 5x. So I'm going to bring down a 5x. Now, if you notice, I have two terms on the outside of my division bar, but only one term down here. I always want to be left with the same number of terms down here as I have outside the division bar. So what I need to do then is bring down this next term, bring down the minus 20. And then we start the process again. We look at just the first term out here and just the first term of the expression we're working with. So you want to say, what do I multiply x by to give me 5x? Well, I have to multiply it by a 5, right? Because isn't x times 5, 5x? So I'm going to take that 5, it's a positive 5, and I'm going to put it up here. And then I'm going to distribute just like I did last time. So 5 times x is 5x. Let's put it under here. And then 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. So let's put a negative 20 here. Okay, and then in order to show that we're subtracting this expression from the expression above it, remember when you subtract, you just change the signs. So I'm going to change this first term to a negative and circle it. I'm going to change the second term to a positive and circle it. And now I'm just going to combine my like terms. So 5x minus 5x, well, that cancels. And then negative 20 plus 20, that cancels too. So what that means is when everything cancels, there's no remainder. Remember when you did long division with numbers, right? Sometimes there was a remainder, sometimes there wasn't. So just to sum up what we did here, when we took the 2x squared minus 3x minus 20 and divided it by x minus 4, our answer, right, the quotient to this problem is 2x plus 5. All right, so now let's take a look at number 2. Now, we know that we know we put the numerator under the division bar, and we put the denominator outside the division bar. Now, here's the deal. This one's a little different because if you look back at number 1, see how when you go to combine your like terms, everything's lined up, right? The x squareds are in line, the x's are in line. In this step, the x's are in line, the numbers are in line. Now, in order for everything to line up nicely like that, you have to look at your original expression, right? The expression, the dividend, the numerator here, what we're going to be placing underneath the division bar. See how this goes from x to the third down to x squared, and it's missing that x term. It's missing that x to the first term, and then it jumps right down to our number. If you want everything to line up nicely, you need to basically account for every single term. So when you go to write this, I'm going to write x to the third, and then I'm going to bring down my plus 2x squared. And since there's no term, like, x term, x to the first term between our x squared and our number, our x to the 0 term, we need to put a placeholder in there, okay? We're going to write plus 0x before we bring down the minus 7. Okay, so let me just explain that again. Since we're missing a term that has an x to the first, right? Doesn't this x really mean x to the first? What we do is we kind of put a little placeholder in there. We write plus 0x. That way we have a term for every exponent. So here's x cubed, x squared, x to the first, and technically this is x to the 0. That's why we don't see one there. And then we're going to take our numerator and we're going to put it out here. Okay, this is our divisor. This is what we are dividing by. And now we're going to start the long division process. And when we do, everything should line up because every term is accounted for. Okay, so let's start. So we look at our first term on the outside and our first term underneath the division bar. And we say, what do we multiply x by to give us x cubed? Well, we're going to multiply that by x squared. So let's put an x squared up here. And then we're going to distribute. We're going to distribute the x squared to both of these two terms. So x squared times x is x cubed. And then x squared times negative 2 is negative 2x squared. Okay, now we want to subtract. We know when we subtract, we're going to change the signs, and you're going to circle that sign so you know which sign we're using. Okay, I mean, I'm using a different color here, but you don't have to. So I'm going to change this to subtraction and circle it. That's the sign I'm using. I'm going to change this to addition and circle it. That's the sign I'm using. It also lets me know, it's kind of like a double check. Look, I did change my signs. So what happens is your first two terms cancel off, which will always happen if you're doing it right, because x cubed minus x cubed is 0. And then here, when I combine 2x squared plus 2x squared, that's going to give me 4x squared. Okay, and then I'm going to bring down my next term. So I'm bringing down that plus 0x. Okay, because if you have two terms out here, you always want to have the same number of terms down here. All right, so now we want to look at the first term on the outside of the division bar and the first term underneath it. And you want to say, what do I multiply x by to give me 4x squared? Well, I multiply it by 4x. So it's a positive 4x. And then I'm just going to distribute this 4x to both terms that we're dividing by. So 4x times x is 4x squared. And then 4x times negative 2 is negative 8x. And now in order to subtract, I'm going to change my sign and circle it, and change my sign and circle it. And please make sure to change your signs after you finish distributing this to both terms. I find when people try to, let me distribute this and change a sign, and then distribute this and change a sign, I find people tend to make mistakes, forget to change one of the signs. So I would just wait until you're done distributing and then change both signs at once. Okay, so now these two cancel off, and then here 0x plus 8x is 8x. And we're going to bring down this last term, negative 7. Okay, so start the process one more time. look at the first term on the outside of the division bar and look at the first term under the division bar, right, where we left off, and say, what do I multiply x by to give me 8x? Well, I multiply it by 8, so I'm going to put a positive 8 up here. And when I go to distribute, 8 times x is 8x. And then 8 times negative 2 is negative 16. All right, so let's subtract. We're going to change our signs and circle, change the sign and circle. Now look at what happens here. The first two terms cancel off. But when I combine these two terms, okay, they don't cancel. Negative 7 plus 16 is positive 9. And since we have nothing else to bring down, since we can't continue the process, this right here is called our remainder. So basically what we're left with is 9 parts out of the x minus 2 we were dividing by. So what we're going to do is, this is our quotient, and to that we're going to add on the 9 parts out of this x minus 2 we were dividing by. Okay, so this right here is our answer. This is the quotient plus the remainder over what we were dividing by. Now, one thing I just want to point out, if your remainder is, let's say, a negative number, you could just put the negative on top here, right? You could write negative 9 over that. But usually, instead of having two signs in a row, instead of having a plus negative, what we would do instead is, if our remainder is negative, we would just make this right here a minus sign.